NXT ended up getting neutered on on January the 14th, 2024. The show got cut off at 9:59. 9:59 and 59 seconds, not 1 second over. But we ended up seeing what happened anyway. I had to wait a couple of minutes and it was up on Twitter. So we'll talk about the big surprise at the end of NXT. We're going to talk about that. And let's get into the show. Obafemi starts the show, says that he has always been backed by destiny and that he's not one of these people who didn't think he could do it. He knew he could do it. Trick always had a ceiling, while Oba himself has no ceiling. Then he called Eddie Thorpe gum on the bottom of his shoe and told him to go annoy someone else. Tony D'Angelo appeared, says that he was the one man that beat Obafemi, and if he wanted to become the champion, he could, and be the double belt Don. Then Tony D'Angelo got attacked by Ridge Holland, who of course attacked him last week. And then Eddie Thorpe assaulted Obafemi from behind. Obafemi then went to Ava's office to demand a match with Eddie Thorpe. And in typical dumb Ava fashion, she wasn't in favor of doing it. She didn't want to do the match. So Obafemi had to hem up and really almost kill Mr. Stone before she decided to cough up that match. So next week it'll be Obafemi versus Eddie Thorpe for the NXT Championship, and Eddie Thorpe laughed while claiming that he set a trap that Obafemi fell for. This was the whole purpose of him being in this thing, is that they needed somebody for Obafemi to beat, and I guess Eddie Thorpe is going to be the guy. I'm not thrilled with it, but they have to make new stars. You know, they have to at least try to make new stars, and so they're going to try to make a new star out of this Eddie Thorpe guy. Fine. Now, for Tony D'Angelo and Ridge Holland, they were fighting for the rest of the night. Their match is also going to be next week for the North American title. They were fighting backstage. They were fighting in the parking lot. They were fighting all over the place. Just generic brawling. So, that ought to be interesting. Okie dokie. Ethan Page was walking around mocking the mid-card guys and the undercard guys. Using The Rock's gimmicks and all this kind of stuff. Even calling The Rock DJ. Like he knew him personally, as, you know, somebody like Ethan Page tends to do. I didn't like this because it was him going back to being kind of Miz-ish and being silly when he's supposed to be like this sadistic evil heel. Anyway, he starts getting accosted by this Filipino earthworm Jim, Dante Chen, who is a super duper senior who has been in WWE since at least 2019. Dante Chen has been in WWE for a long time. And his NXT appearances have been sporadic. Very sporadic. So he wrestled Ethan Page and lost in a squash. Then Ethan Page crushed his leg between the stairs and the ring post. Javon Evans ran out there to try to help him. Then he got jabbed in the face. But because he got this newly wired jaw, he fell to the ground, and Ethan Page hovered over him saying, "Smile for me! Smile for me!" Which is all great, except for the fact that he was being silly not too long before this. We got to do something about Dante Chen, man. He's got to be on the clock, right? I don't see him going up. So he's got to go somewhere. He can't be sitting in NXT forever, right? Ethan Page is okay. They're just building him up so that, you know, Javon Evans will have somebody to overcome later on. I did like the fire of Javon Evans' return, so that was pretty good. So all of that was the setup, and there were some matches on the show too. Stephanie Vaquer lost her number one contender spot to Shotzi. Okay, let's talk about this, because I have a big problem with this. So Stephanie Vaquer won a fatal four-way match that was set up last week for the North American title to wrestle Fallon Henley. Shotzi pinned Fallon Henley in a 6-woman tag. Ava, being the big old dumbass that she actually is, decided that these two should have to wrestle each other to decide what Stephanie Vaquer has already decided, which is that she's the number one contender. Shotzi is in the match and she's doing her best. Shotzi's okay. She's doing a tiger suplex. She got a top rope hurricanrana, but all of her stuff still looks telegraphed, meaning there's a slight halt to what she's doing. As you know, she was walking through the match, and I hate that. That's the most NXT, Ring of Honor, AEW pre-show kind of stuff that you would ever see, is when you see talent basically sleepwalking through their spots because they over-practiced it. Shotzi has that syndrome now too. So it's Gigi, it's Shotzi, and there's Cora Jade. There's so many of the girls in NXT where their offense doesn't look legitimate because they're telegraphing what they do because they know what they're supposed to do next and their opponent knows what they're supposed to do next, and so they basically just let's go from spot to spot. It's not feeling natural. It doesn't feel like a real fight. So Shotzi, she's working the match. The match is actually quite solid. It's not terrible outside of Shotzi's telegraphing. Stephanie is actually making her look good. And then here comes JC Jane. And I'm like, oh no, interference. So while JC is in, she gets dragged into the ring and headbutted by Stephanie Vaquer. And on the other side, Fallon Henley hit Stephanie Vaquer in the back with the belt. So she didn't sell it. She sold it a little bit. She registered it. But she didn't go down or anything. So she turned around to see Fallon Henley, and then she got rolled up by Shotzi and pinned. I instantly almost pulled out my hair, but I have so little of it left, I decided to not bother doing that. And so Shotzi is now the number one contender after beating the number one contender who won the number one contenders match. I don't know. I don't like this. Look, I get what he's trying to do. I get what Sean's trying to do here. I get it. I understand it 100%. He wants to get some heat on Fallon Henley. He also wants to be like, hey, Fallon Henley is picking her opponents by, picking a easier option, I guess you could say. Rather than wrestling Stephanie Vaquer, she's going to have to wrestle Shotzi, and that's an easier opponent. Also, Shotzi and Fallon Henley already have history because they've been in this feud together, and Shotzi's pinned Fallon Henley. So it's not bad booking. It's actually not. It actually is logical storytelling. The fault of this all is that when you tell people this is a number one contenders match, that should be what it is. Now, if there was a reason for Stephanie to put her number one contendership on the line, let's say like Rey Mysterio put his number one contendership at the Royal Rumble on the line, or after he won the Royal Rumble, he put his contendership on the line because he was so offended by things that Randy Orton said. Okay, that's just a dumbass babyface. But in this situation, he wasn't a dummy. Stephanie didn't make the mistake. She didn't pull a Darby Allin and put her title shot on the line. This was Ava being an idiot and put her title shot on the line. So that to me is unfair. It puts heat on Ava rather than putting heat on Fallon Henley. And so, yes, Fallon Henley should screw somebody out of the match. She's the heel. So her screwing Stephanie was actually quite logical. But everybody wanted Stephanie Vaquer versus Fallon Henley. That's what they wanted. They're just making you wait for it. That's all. Fine. Stephanie Vaquer, during the commercial, she's walking around backstage. She's very short. She's like 4'11" or something like that. Maybe even 5 foot. Maybe 5'1". And she's grabbing people and she's choking people up backstage. There's no audio to this because it's during commercial. But she's searching for, I'm guessing, Fallon Henley. She finds JC Jane and ends up choking her against the wall. She eyes up Ethan Page, who is being disrespectful in how he looks at her. All of this is quite entertaining. I like this. They're showing a different side to her. I struggle with this because I don't like it, but I get it, and I want to give them some leeway because they're trying to make new stars. And Shotzi apparently is one of the new stars they're really trying to smash over. It's just unfortunate that it comes at Stephanie Vaquer's expense. And I don't like it because they just did this with Obafemi, where Obafemi became the number one contender by winning the Iron Survivor Challenge and still had to deal with Eddie Thorpe, who claims some kind of contendership for no good reason. You know, if these things need to mean something, you can't do this back to back like this. It's okay if the Royal Rumble winner is an idiot and loses his Royal Rumble, number one contendership because he put it on the line. If you want to have a guy put his money on the bank on the line and he loses it, okay, you can do that every once in a while, but you can't have that be a back-to-back story. And it's a back-to-back story at this point. Now, it's going to end up in the same place, as far as I'm concerned. It's a three-way feud where it's going to be Fallon Henley and her girls versus Shotzi and her girls versus Stephanie Vaquer, who's going to be by herself. Or she may form her own little team to combat Fatal Influence. It's also pretty consistent with the way Shawn Michaels books, which is he gets the favored babyface really close. Either they get a direct title shot and they lose, and then they just start over from the bottom, kind of like Julia did. Or they get really, really close and they lose, and they have to start over from the bottom, which is seemingly what he's doing now. He's done this trick in NXT UK, and it works sometimes. In fact, it worked tremendously with somebody like Ilya Dragunov. It worked really well when they did a similar gimmick with him. So it works if you are allowed to do it correctly. But you can't have it so close together because now you just make your number one contendership matches don't mean anything. So what next? Is the Meta Girls going to have to defend their number one contendership against some rando women's team because, well, they weren't involved with this match? It's like, no, come on, man. You should have done something that got Stephanie out of the match, even if it was just a disqualification just to get her out of it. But I see what he's doing. So Kalani Jordan and Zarya are talking backstage when Cora Jade shows up, and she looks like a stick figure. Like if a very immature boy drew a stick figure with gigantic breasts, that would be Cora Jade. And she mocked Kalani Jordan and ended up getting slapped. This led to a match later on in the night where Kalani Jordan wrestled Cora Jade, and Cora Jade was eyeing Masha Slamovich, the Impact Wrestling, TNA Wrestling women's champion, aka the Knockouts champion. Cora Jade and Kalani Jordan was alright, I guess. Cora Jade is not the best. She's not very good. I mean, she's already completely and totally unathletic. But now with her augmented body, she can barely move, and she also has the telegraphing problem that I talked about earlier. Kalani Jordan is being aggressive. She was a little overzealous. This gave Cora Jade an opportunity to rake the eyes, and then while she was selling the eye rake, she hit the double arm DDT to win. So Cora Jade won the match. They're teasing Masha Slamovich versus Cora Jade. They actually put over TNA having a pay-per-view this Sunday, Genesis. And I'm glad that the TNA crossovers are not done. Even Jordan Grace, she was teasing that she was going to appear on this show. But I'm pretty sure she has to finish up her business with Tessa Blanchard first. But Masha Slamovich is legitimately one of the best female wrestlers in the world. I have routinely said that. She is quite good. The best women's match of 2024 was Masha Slamovich versus Jordan Grace at Bound for Glory in Detroit. It was fantastic, for my money. It wasn't 40 minutes, but it was very, very good women's wrestling. And Masha Slamovich should have been in WWE a long time ago. Maybe one day she will be. But just her showing up here is pretty cool. Her versus Cora Jade is going to be a very interesting match because Masha can be a bit physical, and Cora Jade I don't think she's ready for that. I don't think Cora Jade is ready for Masha Slamovich to hit her in the face with like a forearm shiver that's probably going to dislocate her ribs or something like that. It ought to be funny. But I was glad to see that the NXT TNA situation is not dead. All right. What we got here next? The Meta Girls, that would be Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend, defeated the Unholy Union of Isla Dawn and Alba Fire. The match was okay. It was a pretty long match, too. The Meta Girls won fairly clean. So, I enjoyed that. I thought that was fine. You know, Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend, it's about time for them to get out of NXT anyway. And now they're the number one contenders for the women's tag team titles. It's unfortunate that Bianca Belair is stuck in the tag team championship division, but it would be a great bump for the TV ratings if she was dragged over to NXT to defend the titles on NXT rather than in the middle of SmackDown or something stupid like that. You know, so that would be fun. It would be worth doing if Bianca Belair and Naomi wrestle on NXT against Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson. That would be great. I wouldn't mind that at all. So DIY also visited NXT, and I wanted to throw my TV because you can't get away from these fucking bums. You just can't get away from them. Anyway, they wanted to watch Fraxium, but they wouldn't tell us why. They promised no shenanigans and they delivered none. And so they're the best tag team in the world, but they've heard that Fraxium is the best tag team, so they wanted to come and see them. And they stood on the balcony while Fraxium wrestled OTM. This was not the best Fraxium match because OTM, quite frankly, is not good. They're very not good. These are two very big dudes, but they're extremely green. I mean, even for when you compare that these guys have been on the roster for about a year, they predate Jada Parker, by the way, who was introduced in their stable, and she surpassed them in a very short amount of time. She's actually quite good. These guys are bums. And of course, Fraxium beat them. So they're teasing something with DIY and Fraxium. For a minute, I thought, are they going to phase out the tag team championships in NXT the way that they phased out the NXT women's tag team titles? That popped into my mind. I'm hoping that they don't do that, but it's possible, and anything is possible in the World Wrestling Federation. But it also seems like it's the next level for Nathan Fraser and Axiom, where they have to lose the belts to somebody. Maybe they'll lose them to DIY, or they'll just use DIY to try to bump a TV rating, even though I don't think that they can. I don't think DIY has the cachet to bump a TV rating. I just don't think so. But anyway, they're doing this, so there's that. So the main event, or the final segment, was Roxanne Perez addressing NXT since her loss to Julia. And Roxanne Perez basically said that she was the one who brought the division to being the best in the world, that she has been the one that has attracted the best women's wrestlers here to WWE, or to NXT rather, and the division is going to be sad and pathetic without her. You can kiss being the best division in the world goodbye, and said that the NXT and the crowd did not deserve her because they wanted her to lose. So they teased earlier that somebody was getting out of a car and they was wearing boots and all this kind of stuff, and everybody was like, oh, it's somebody. Who is going to be? And then Jordan Grace had, tweeted something about a half hour beforehand about her timeline going to blow up. And then it turned out it wasn't her, it was Bayley. Bayley. She's on all 3 shows. It's like hot sauce, And I'm not a big hot sauce guy. So it might be like salt. Just put it on everything. And she had no real reason to be out here, really. So she was telling Roxanne Perez that she needed to adapt. You can sulk or you can adapt. And then Roxanne Perez says, look, I didn't ask you for no advice. So then, Bayley says, what, you've been asking for advice since you got here. You've been asking for advice since you was a little girl. And Roxanne Perez says, you're not my role model anymore. Maybe I can be yours. And it went into Family Feud. It went directly into Family Feud. I started seeing bald ass Steve Harvey. So what? I was very disappointed because I thought there was going to be more to it, but there's only like 5 or 10 more seconds after she told Bayley, maybe I can be your role model. So from the complete segment had Bayley say that she's going to win the championship on SmackDown. Then she got slapped by Roxanne Perez, and then her and Roxanne brawled, and then the show cut off. So Roxanne was being disrespectful to Bayley, and I guess they're going to build something here, which I don't know the reason why they would build anything here, considering Bayley is not going to be working in NXT. Now, they may do like a special match. Maybe that's the point, is they're going to have Bayley come down to NXT to do one match with Roxanne Perez, which I guess is worth doing because, it just could be fun. But we've had too much Bayley in the last couple. And then she's getting a championship match on SmackDown too. Holy guacamole. Why are we getting so much Bayley all of a sudden? This seems a bit excessive, if you ask me. I mean, my God. But I do want to say this. I thought that Roxanne Perez was going to be the first woman to announce for the Royal Rumble. That's what I thought she was going to do. Because we haven't heard anything about the women's Royal Rumble. We've got like 4 or 5 top-level men who have entered the Royal Rumble already. No women. The women haven't even discussed the Royal Rumble yet. And it's probably because Bayley keeps popping up on all of the shows, getting into all of the champions' faces, and being very excessive. But I guess we'll see. So it's likely going to be some kind of special challenge. Julia did not appear on this show. Trick Williams did not appear. They teased a segment where Trick Williams was supposed to go find out, what's next for him. And I thought that was a segment on the show, but it turns out that's going to be his excuse for not being on the show, is that he's out on a mission to figure out how he's going to move forward in this world without a championship, I guess. I don't know. Seems very odd to me. So here's some quick hits from some other things that occurred on the show. Ashanti, Diodonis, and Carmen Petrovich are now official. They kissed on the show, which I know a lot of people was very ooh and ahhing about. And Adriana Rizzo was trying to be recruited by Shawn Spears, but Izzy Dame told him to bug off. And then you also had Charlie Dempsey get a rematch against Lexis King. I guess they're going to fight next week, which I'm not sure we needed 3 of those matches. I think 2 was enough. Well, they've already had 3, I think. So this is going to be the 4th match between those guys. So ultimately, NXT was a solid show. It wasn't bad. They need to do something with their timing, especially if the show is going to go off at a hard 10. Then maybe having 5 matches on the show and those 5 matches being very long is probably not a good idea. But it seems like they always try to cram too much in the show and it goes a little over, Like there's always a segment or 2 that probably could have been shaved, or a segment or 2 that could have just been cut completely. Like, I think the entire segment with Shawn Spears and Adriana Rizzo would have been great if you just put it up on Twitter. That if you'd have just got rid of just that part of the show, you would have had enough space to fit Bayley and Roxanne Perez getting into a brawl. And that segment wasn't even that long. That segment was probably about 15, 20 seconds. And if you'd have just got rid of that 15 to 20 seconds, you still would have had time for Bayley and everything she needed to do there. So this was a fun episode. Clearly it wasn't as great as last week, but it was indeed building off of last week. The big story, of course, being that Stephanie Vaquer was pinned by Shotzi, which seemingly upset everybody. But this is one of those situations where people did not get mad at the heel. They got mad at the promotion. And that's that's the difference between somebody who's watching this show and then somebody who's a smark. Because when you're a smark, you just start blaming Shawn Michaels. Like, why did you book this way? When you're a fan, you are upset at the characters on the show for doing dumb shit. Like Ava for making this match. And, Fallon Henley for, interfering in the match. And Stephanie being a dummy for even going along with the match. Those are the kinds of questions that you can get mad at the rules or you can get mad at the players. And, smarts typically get mad at the rules. They don't get mad at the players. So, only time you really should blame the promoter and the booking is if it's something that makes no sense. In this situation, it makes some sense, but you still should not have done it because your word has to mean something. And if you're going to keep putting hoops in front of people's faces, then we shouldn't buy into number one contenders matches because now we know that this person has to either defend it or there's some way to circumvent it, where that shouldn't be the case, especially with the Iron Survivor match. There shouldn't be any circumventing that. And Ava just looks like an idiot for booking that. She also looked like an idiot for resisting having a championship match on the show. And she has this attitude where she doesn't want to reward Eddie Thorpe for his bad behavior. But she's already rewarded him for his bad behavior. And don't you think fighting Oba Femi is a punishment? You should view it that way. Like him getting his ass beat by Oba Femi should be a punishment. And if Oba can't beat him, then, well, that's Oba's bad, right? Anyway. Otherwise, though, I think the show was pretty solid. There's obviously some issues here, but mostly I had fun with it. Let me know what you think. We'll talk later.